I got berated at a lot of the meetings. People would show up just to talk to me, basically yell at me. It was tough, but if you're going to be an elected official and put yourself out like that, you got to have tough skin.
Did it feel dangerous at all, like these people yelling at you?
Yeah, there was one board meeting where a gentleman actually showed up with a firearm. And he showed up with a firearm and he said he had profile sheets on each of us, including the superintendent, that he knew where we lived. He knew what we were doing. We better watch out. And there was actually a constable in the audience at that meeting. And when he was confronted about what the gentleman just said, his answer was, well, it's his free speech.
Courtney, it's such an interesting story. So where do you live?
I live in Granbury, Texas. It's a small rural town just outside of Dallas-Fort Worth, about 20, 30 minutes southwest of the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
You were always interested in your school and running for the school board, yeah?
Well, I'm a former educator. I've been involved in education since I was about 19. I taught in a Montessori school. I've taught in a private Christian school. I've taught in public school. So I have a little bit of a diverse background as far as that goes. And, you know, my kids attend the local public schools here. And it's different here in a small town in Texas. The district, the school district, the public schools are like a cornerstone of the community. We're very much that Friday night lights community, and the school is what draws everyone together, kind of that cornerstone of our community.
And so you decide to run for the school board, yeah?
Yeah, I decided to run for the school board. It wasn't something I initially planned to do. It was kind of presented to me as an option, and I felt like I had a duty to kind of step up because of all the things that we were hearing about on, you know, the news, social media. Even some members from my community had some concerns that they brought to me. And so I felt like I would give it a go. I'd throw my name in. And if I won, great. And if not, no big loss. It's okay. I'm still involved in the community. I'm still involved in my kids' education. And it wasn't something I was looking to kind of hang my hat on. It just kind of worked out this way. And so it's one thing hearing things on social media and in the news. You have to take a lot of that with a grain of salt. But when you're starting to hear it from some people in the community, that's when I started to think, okay, maybe there really is something here I need to look at.
Because you've taught in these different kinds of schools. Did that give you a unique perspective, just being in all these different places where all these people think differently about problems?
I think so. And not just different schools, but different grade levels. I taught third grade. Most of my experiences in third grade, and we were self-contained. So that means I was teaching all the classes: reading, writing, arithmetic, science, social studies. And then I also taught sixth grade social studies. So sixth grade social studies is more like geography and learning about different cultures in the world. And so a lot of these issues that we hear about now is something that came up as discussions, especially in that sixth grade classroom that I taught. And it's funny because I remember one of the world religions that we were talking about was Muslims and different demographics in that region of the world. And the question of religion came up, and it was just an organic conversation that happens in the classroom. And of course, extremism comes up and people talking about 9/11. And I had the opportunity at that point, way back then, to talk about, you know, extremism doesn't have any limits. It can affect any religion or any demographic, any culture. And I was like, you can even see examples of extremism in Christianity. And I gave examples and other examples throughout history in the world that we've seen. It's not confined to just being specific to one group of people or a culture or a religion. It's something that can infect across the board. And so it's kind of like coming full circle now to what I've been through with running on the school board and looking into the CRT and the SEL and the dog whistle words we're hearing in the media about what's happening in our public schools. And then I have a chance to go in and look firsthand at this curriculum and dive deep into it. And at first I thought maybe I would find a little something in there that, okay, I can understand how this was taken out of context, maybe because they don't have a background in education. Maybe it's being twisted deliberately, but I didn't find anything close to what they were talking about. It was just so far out of left field. It didn't even come close to what they were trying to say was in this curriculum.
Not everybody knows this incredible story, Courtney. So tell us kind of what actually you were asked to do? What were we worried about? What there was, a band going, like what was going on? Just give us the context so the audience can understand.
Okay, so when I ran, the big buzzwords at that point were CRT and SEL, and the sexualizing of our kids through the SEL programs. And SEL, for people who don't know, is social emotional learning. It's something that we all do with our own children when we're teaching them how to deal with those big adult emotions. And, they're only 2 years old, and helping build their emotional maturity and teaching them how to be good friends, to help around the house, just to be a good person, really, and be a functional part of society. We all need social emotional learning. So when I was hearing these accusations about the SEL, it was surprising to me, because before I started teaching in public school, I was in pre-K. So I taught in pre-K, and that's all. Early childhood education is all about SEL, because you're having to help grow these children to be able to function in a group setting with other people, and learning how to express in appropriate ways when you've been hurt, when you're angry, to just be able to communicate your emotions effectively. And a lot of that is SEL. And so when I was hearing these accusations, I decided to run for school board and look into it. And then the CRT, that was something that I was hearing from community members that was in our curriculum. And so when I asked for examples of it, I never could get solid evidence of the example. Oh, we don't have that anymore. We don't have that lesson anymore, or whatever the excuse was. So I felt like once I did win my election, I had a fiduciary duty to our community to go in and look in the curriculum, find where this stuff was or wasn't, and let our community know, hey, this is what I found, and this is what it really is, or hey, this really isn't appropriate for this grade level, and we need to look at that, or it's not there at all. And that's what I found. It just wasn't there at all.
Well, what were the accusations? What were people worried about specifically that was in the curriculum?
So some of the things that they were worried about that was in the curriculum was teaching children that they should be sorry for being born white, that they owe society because they were born white and they were born privileged. And so they felt like in this community, we are mostly white. We have a very big Hispanic population. But my issue with that is we shouldn't be teaching children that they should feel bad about their color of their skin, period. And so it wasn't about a black or white. And so that was a concern for me. The other concern was sexualizing our young children. So some of the things, the book issue was just starting to build in the background. And I don't know how many people are familiar with what happened here in Texas with the books, but that was just starting to build in the background. It hadn't really come to the forefront of my campaign when I was running. The SEL had to do with, like, they were saying that you're sexualizing children, you're trying to groom them to be transgender and LGBTQ and all of these things, which that wasn't the case either. But that kind of leads into the book issue, where a lot of people were saying that the books we had in our libraries were inappropriate because they were pornography books, is what they were calling them. Another dog whistle word, that there was no pornography in our libraries. There was one state representative here, I believe his name was Matt Krause, if I remember correctly, and I think it was a Moms for Liberty group, brought a list of books to him that they deemed inappropriate for our public school libraries. And so he took that list to Governor Abbott, and then Governor Abbott told the schools, you need to make sure you don't have any pornography in your libraries. And there was really not a lot of direction from TEA. So TEA is Texas Education Agency, and they kind of oversee the public schools. So we were kind of in uncharted waters as far as school districts and this book issue goes. So we just took that list of books and went to go see if we had any on our shelves. And the ones that we did have, we put a book review committee together and had them look through and the book review committee was made up of community members, parents, professionals, and librarians and teachers. And so we had this book review committee put together. They went through this list of books, and out of all of those books, I believe it was only eight books were deemed to meet the standard that Abbott gave us of being highly sexually explicit or vulgar. Like, there was a certain standard that the books had to meet. And when you're looking at a book, it isn't just black and white, because there's a lot of context in a book. You can't remove a book just because you don't agree with the ideas in the book. And there's more to that book in the story and in what's happening throughout the book. And so when you're looking at those specific things, you have to balance that out with what is actually being presented as the idea in that book. And so it was, like I said, uncharted waters. But at the end of the day, out of the 100 and something books that we were given, the book review committee only deemed 8 of them to actually meet that standard to be taken off of our shelves.
So in the community, like, you're not sure you're going to get elected. You get elected and you go to the first meeting and not naming names, but what do you find there? Do you find a polarized group of people? Do you find a receptive group of people? Is everybody there for the right reasons? And what do you find in your first meeting?
They were very receptive, and none of the things that I had heard about the other board members rang true at all. They were very receptive, very friendly, very willing to work with me and my running mate that I ran with at the time, very accommodating. There was no polarization. I didn't come up against any kind of brick wall or anything.
And you mentioned earlier that the community meets a lot. Like Friday Night Lights is, it's like a football. Everybody's always out there meeting together. Community is very close knit. Do you know a lot of people in the community, and are they happy that you've gone on to the school board?
A lot are and a lot aren't, since I've gone public with what I found, or should I say what I didn't find.
Right.
And the group of people that I was working with at the time had a bigger political agenda at play that I wasn't aware that I was really a part of until after the fact. I was part of a small podcast here locally. It was called The Blue Shark Show. And the whole point of the podcast was truth and transparency, bringing accountability to local government. Mm-hmm. And so when I discovered that this curriculum didn't exist and I went back to them to let them know this, they were not interested in letting the community know.
How long does it take you to do the research, to go through all these things? Does it take a while?
It did, because at first I wasn't exactly sure which domino to hit first, like where in the curriculum did I need to look first. And it wasn't until I attended it was a Moms for Liberty event, and I believe it was at Glenn Beck's radio station. They had a documentary screening of Mind Polluters. It was called Mind Polluters. And it was in that documentary that I was able to pinpoint SEL is where they were saying everything was originating from. The bad stuff, the sexualizing of the kids, the CRT, all of it was originating from the SEL, the social emotional learning curriculum. And so that was at the end of December, beginning of January, and I was elected in November. So I believe I sent an email that night or the very next day asking for all the SEL lesson plans from the last year. And so it took me about a month or so to go through everything. So that would have been February, March is when I went to them to let them know, hey, this is not here. And I was trying to keep that communication open, keep that bridge open, that we could try and still work together to get this information out to the community. I didn't want to cause a divide because I knew it was going to cause a divide in our community, and it eventually did, but I felt like I had that responsibility to let our community know that this is what was going on and this is what this group was really about.
Who are you having to report to? So when you go back, you're doing all this research, you get the findings, and what group are you going back to say, you know what, it doesn't look as insidious or whatever?
So that is the group that I was working with on the Blue Shark Show. So that would have been Mike Lang and Nate Criswell and my running mate at the time too, Melanie Graft.
But even before that, like in the month that you're reading the materials, you're a critical thinker, you're approaching with an open attitude. Did you have an expectation of what you would find?
I thought I would find a nugget of something that I can understand how they've read this wrong and have taken it to mean something different. I thought I was going to be able to find something in there that justified where they were maybe coming up with some of this stuff. But like I said, it didn't even come close.
So gradually in this month that you're reading things, you're just not finding things. And then when do you get to a place where you're like, well, I don't see what everybody thought was going to be in here? Does that take a while?
Yeah, so that was around March, April timeframe. And I was trying to, like I said, keep those lines of communication open because I really wanted the group that I had been working with to support me in telling the truth about what was really in our schools, or should I say not in our schools. And I was told that wasn't the narrative that they were going to push, that their goal was for me and my running mate, Melanie, to pit us against the rest of the board And whether that was true or not, that was the narrative we were going with. And they were going to knock every other board member off and get their people put in and take over the school board.
The whole thing. Okay, so when you're picking the group of people to do the research, first of all, do you get to pick those people?
The book committee was put together by the community. So people that were interested in serving on the book committee, they were able to email in, and then board members were also able to put people on the book committee. Like if they had someone they recommended to be on. Melanie Graft recommended Monica Brown to be on that book committee as well.
I just want to understand the ability for people to be reading the books to come in without bias, because that's, to your point, people are coming with a point of view already and want to maybe read into something, but people are saying out of the 126 or whatever, 150 books, 8 maybe we might look at, right? And so that is already a good thing that people were coming in open and just reading the material, right? Because you have to trust the people that are doing the research.
Right. And these are parents in the community that are on this committee as well. It's not just teachers and librarians. These are professionals. These are parents. These are community members that have children in the schools too, that they don't want porn in the library. And from what I understand, the reason why the books that were removed is because they had some really graphic depictions in there. And that was what made them, okay, this has to go because of how graphic it got in some of the depictions. And so I get that I understand that, but it's a dangerous, slippery slope.
Yeah.
So, when you get to your results after the month or so that you're thinking about this, do you present that just to the board first?
No, not, I was talking with the board president, and before I went public, I definitely talked with the board president because according to our board policy, I need to have her blessing, so to speak, because it would cause a big rift in the community because we are such a centerpiece of the community. When you've got division on the board like that, it ripples out into the community. And I knew it was going to cause problems with that group of people that I was previously part of because I wasn't going to be their political puppet on the school board.
Did the school board itself hear your conclusions and what were their responses?
They were like, yeah, we know.
Interesting.
They knew that stuff wasn't in their districts. In fact, the lady that I ran against, her name's Nancy Alana, and I actually helped get her reelected after everything. They knew it wasn't there. And Nancy, the lady that I ran against, was telling the community during her campaign, that's not in our district. And so people, when you get them emotionally charged, especially when it's involving children, I guess it was a tactic that the group that I was a part of wanted to use to rile up the bases to get them out to vote.
Did you know before you ran that you were going to become a weird pawn of all of this? Or were you just did you run just because you wanted to do something good in the community? You'd been an educator and you wanted to be of service.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I was coming from because I wanted to be of service. Like if this stuff really was here, like if it's really as bad as they say it is, let's find it, let's clean it out. And we need a fresh set of eyes in there to look it over. And I will be that person. But I wasn't making promises to this group that said I was just going to go along with whatever the narrative was that they were trying to push. Like if it was there, I would be honest about it. But if it wasn't, I was going to be honest about that too.
So, okay, you go to your board, they all seem supportive or already have a knowledge of what you found. Now you're going to go back to your group, the podcast group, right? And do you go to a meeting? Is there a meeting and you go, hey guys, good news. It's not what we thought. What's that meeting like?
So that was a phone call I made, and I was told to stop talking to the rest of the board members. I was told to stop talking to them, that they're not my friends, and they're just lying to me. And I was like, that's not even what I just said. I said, I did this research. This isn't something they're telling me. This is something I found out for myself. And then shortly after that, my running mate that I ran with, Melanie Graft, they told her to stop talking to me.
And did she?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And you're trying to do a good thing. You've done it from your heart. You have no bias and you're just trying to do a good thing. Were you surprised by this result? I assume your running mate was a friend of yours or
yeah,
at least a colleague. Was it surprising, this feeling?
It was. I thought for a little while there when I was talking to her and explaining the stuff to her about the curriculum and all of these things, that I thought she was believing me. I thought she was hearing what I was saying. And, 15 minutes later, she would tell me, well, I need to call and talk to Dave Eagle. He's one of our commissioners. And so then I guess she'd call and talk to him. And the next time I talked to her, she'd be right back to the other side. It felt like I was getting through to her. But then as soon as she talked to her person, I don't know, her handler, I guess that would be the appropriate word, he'd reel her right back in over to their side. And so eventually she was told to just stop talking to me altogether.
And you're a person of faith. You've used your critical thinking skills to make a decision about this material. At what point do you actually go to your community and say what you found?
I think it was in April, and I did a Facebook Live. I did a couple Facebook Lives, actually, and just kind of laid it out, what happened, and that it wasn't there, why I left the Blue Shark show. I didn't go into a super amount of detail, but I just gave a brief synopsis of what I found, what I didn't find, and letting the community know. And it was like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders when I did that, because like I said, I felt like I had a responsibility to let our community know. Like, after all, it was the platform I ran on. So I've got to hold myself accountable to our community and let them know it's not here. And your school district is doing great. Your school board wasn't lying to you, and your kids are in a great place. They have great teachers. They have a great learning environment. There's no boogeyman in Granbury, Texas.
And what was the conversation on that Facebook Live, right? I mean, were you getting responses? Were people agreeing with you? Or there, what was the kind of the feeling when you kind of laid out the scenario that you had discovered?
Actually, I got a lot of support. I gained a lot of new friends and a lot of new support that I didn't realize I had. There was a few people that, I'm disappointed that they no longer support me, but that's their choice. That's their right. I don't understand that, because I don't know why you would want to believe that these terrible things are there in your district. If you believe that they were there, you elected someone to weed it out and find it. And then the person you elected to do that job comes back and tells you that it's not here. You would think that they would be happy about that. But there are some people that they just won't let that go. Like it is ingrained in them that it is there. And no matter how much evidence you show them to the contrary, they're not willing to let go of that belief.
And that's the thing I want to ask you about, because that's the state of our union right now. Like, that is such a bigger problem. Where do you think that comes from? I mean, in your up close personal with it, what is that digging into something and believing, then we get into misinformation and untruth. And from just your perspective, what is the fear of letting go of something? Like, you're saying, hey, your kids are in a good place. Why would you be afraid to embrace that as the reality? Do you have any insight into that, honestly?
It's mind-boggling. I don't understand it. I think for some of the people, and I don't know without speaking to each individual person, but I think for some of them, it gives them a sense of purpose, like that they're fighting for something. And unless we give them something new to fight for, they're hanging on to that, because without that sense of purpose, I think they will feel lost. And so whether it's rooted in reality or not, it's what makes them feel important.
You're walking a line alone, at least initially you're separating, did you stay on the school board?
Yeah, I'm currently on the school board. I'm up for re-election this November.
Vote for Courtney.
Yeah. So you go public, you do these Facebook Live things. When you go to that next board meeting, what's the feeling?
Oh, I got berated at a lot of the meetings. People would show up just to talk to me, basically yell at me and tell me to get off social media. Quite a few people did that. And it was tough. But if you're going to be an elected official and put yourself out like that, you got to have tough skin.
Did it feel dangerous at all, like these people yelling at you?
Yeah, there was one board meeting where a gentleman actually showed up with a firearm.
Well,
and I was not at that meeting. I was actually on an anniversary trip with my husband, but my kids were watching it. They saw that and it scared them. He made threats. Well, he made threatening statements to several of the school board members, all of us, except for my running mate that I had, Melanie. She was not threatened. And it all stemmed from an executive session that we had where Melanie told the community that we ganged up on her and bullied her in that meeting, which is not what happened at all. But because it's an executive session, we're not allowed to talk about it, although that doesn't seem to prevent her from giving her side of the story. That on top of me coming out publicly, April, May, when I came out in that June meeting is when he showed up with a firearm and he said he had profile sheets on each of us, including the superintendent, that he knew where we lived. He knew what we were doing. We better watch out. That night, one of my younger brothers actually came and slept on our front porch with his own firearm in case someone tried to show up at our house. You know, after someone makes a threat like that, you don't know what they're capable of doing. And there was actually a constable in the audience at that meeting. And when he was confronted about what the gentleman just said, his answer was, well, it's his free speech.
Now, has anybody come up to you at the market or in the hardware store or any place around town? Have you seen people who agreed with you or not agreed with you?
Yeah, I have. And for the most part, the people that are supportive, you know, they're supportive, and it's a great interaction, and it validates what I've done. It helps me feel at peace with going public with everything because I know our community needed it, and I know our kids and our teachers needed it. Our public school needed it. This is an outright attack on our public education. And not just here in Granbury, but it's happening across the state. It's happening across the nation. And I know I cannot be the only board member that has gone through this. I know there has to be other board members who have been in with that side and have hopefully done the research and know better and know that that stuff isn't there. And I just hope that I give them a little bit of inspiration to go public as well, because we've got to use our voice and speak up about this.
How do you talk to your kids? Well, your 3-year-old's probably a little too young to really know what's going on, but how do you talk to your other kids about the stand you took and why it was important and leading by example and all of that?
I don't have to really say much because they see my actions speak for themselves. And it's something that I've always taught them about: honesty and telling the truth and being accountable for your actions and owning up to when you make a mistake. And that's the only way that we can move forward and progress, not only as an individual, but as a community and as a society.
I was so struck by this story when I read about it. It just seems like if every student, if every person just would, search it out for yourself and have some critical thinking about it, how much better our nation would be at this moment in time. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's where our community comes in when we hear the rhetoric and then those narratives being spread, to stop and actually go and do the research. And the thing is, it takes time. And it's easier to read somebody else's research, whether their research is correct or not. But that's what I've challenged people. I was like, go ask for the SEL lesson plans, read them for yourself, verify what I'm telling you. We've got to start doing that as a society, because too many people get away with just outright lying about stuff that isn't even halfway true. And people just eat it up and go along with it. That group think is an extremely dangerous mentality to have. And it's going to be our downfall of one of the most important institutions we have in this nation, which is our public education system.
No, we don't compensate our teachers very well. And now we've entered a phase where we're not trusting them. It's like I wouldn't tell my plumber how to fix my sink. Did you talk to any teachers afterwards? And what's your feeling about teachers in general? Well, you are one, but how do you feel we should be thinking about teachers?
They're in an impossible position, and I feel for them. And that's why I feel like it's so important for me to be vocal, because somebody has to go to bat for them and stand up for them, because they can't, because they don't want to lose their job and they don't want to make the community mad at them. Somebody else has to be the person to take those arrows for them. And so I hope that by me doing this, I can help take some of the heat off of them and get people to realize that these are the same teachers that you go to church with. These are the same teachers that your kids, they play sports with their kids. These are the same teachers you see out when you go out to eat at a restaurant or in the grocery store. They're not some boogeyman out to get your children. And we've got to get back to that community instead of having this separation. Like on social media, it's so easy to distance yourself from the humanity of the person on the other side of that screen. We've got to get back to connecting at that individual level and recognizing each other as humans and treating each other that way.
What is next for you, Courtney? It's incredible that you're being so vocal about all of this, but on a larger scale, what would you like to see happen? What would be a path forward now, given everything that you've experienced?
Well, I'm going to run for re-election, so hopefully I can still continue to advocate for our teachers and our school district and public education in general. Whether I win the re-election or not, I'm still going to advocate for public education. It's something that it's kind of ingrained in me, being an advocate. So, and I hope through this network of people that I have met through all of this, that I'll be able to continue to advocate for public education, regardless of what capacity I do that in.
Yeah, well, it sounds like Congress, maybe.
I don't know about that.
There's so much talk now. I worry, people are throwing around, civil war and all of this stuff. And what you just referenced about how people have to take back thinking for themselves, this idea that Jesse brought up, critical thinking. And we have the kind of added problem of social media so that people are in their own bubbles. And this idea of getting out back into the real world, sitting down and talking with each other. Do you think that when we do sit face to face, you have a cup of coffee with somebody or you share a meal or something, can we reach each other even within our differences?
We can, and there's definitely an opportunity for that bridge to be built. The issue is we have bad actors. So even after I've met individually and had that cup of coffee with a person and connected with them, they go back to that group of people that has this political agenda and they rope them back in. So we're not just up against the social media issue aspect of it. We're up against this political agenda that's just happening in the background with bad actors at play. And I don't know how it is in other states, but in Texas, it is a huge money-making machine. The money in politics is insane because there's no cap and no limit to the amount of donations you can make to people and the political consultants and strategists that make money off of this. Until we can start taking away that incentivization in the political arena, I don't know how else we can change it.
Well, it's an incredibly inspiring story, Courtney, and thank you for doing that for all of us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We want you to be safe and keep fighting out there and however we can support. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us.